It's here first from IPR News. Hey, I'm Megan McKinney. In today's episode, we'll take a look at a bill the governor signed, and a dispute between two Republican candidates for governor was on display last night. It's Friday, March 27th. Governor Kim Reynolds has signed a bill into law that raises the tax on HMO health insurance plans going back to January 1st of this year. The tax paid by some insurance companies is going from less than 1% to 3.5% through September. Reynolds says Iowa is facing growing Medicaid budget deficits. She says she looked at several options to help cover the gap, including her failed proposal to raise the tobacco tax.
This right now looks like probably the most feasible way that we can do that without starting to hurt maybe some of the individuals that are receiving the services, because that would mean taking some of them away.
Democrats oppose the tax increase, saying it'll cause Iowans' health insurance premiums to increase when people are already struggling to afford health care. Reynolds says it's a temporary tax hike, and insurance companies don't have to pass the cost on to Iowans. A dispute between two Republican candidates for governor spilled over into a fundraiser held by the Polk County GOP last night. IPR's Katerina Sostarek has more.
Representative Eddie Andrews said in his speech at the fundraiser that Adam Steen, one of his primary election opponents, was caught in a lie. He says that's a character flaw that the next governor shouldn't have.
If he had honor, he would drop out.
Andrews was nearly kicked off the primary ballot after a Steen supporter challenged his ballot paperwork. Steen's campaign first said the supporter acted independently, but Steen's staff gave copies of Andrews' petitions to the person who filed the challenge. Steen says it's unfortunate his campaign gave a misleading statement.
When you start to gain momentum, when you start to take the lead, those behind you try to fight and punch to get up on your platform. And the last thing I'm going to do is, again, bother myself with any of these little weird arguments.
Primary election day is June 2nd. I'm Katerina Sostarek, IPR News.
City officials in Cedar Falls are considering adding zoning laws for a proposed cryptocurrency mine. But as IPR's James Kelly reports, nearby residents are worried about noise and harm to property values.
The city's Planning and Zoning Commission is looking at whether to approve a proposed crypto mine near property where Cedar Falls Utilities is planning to build a new power plant. Nathan Nebby lives on 22 acres of land directly across from the industrial park where the proposed power plant and crypto mine would be built. He says he and his family received notice of the possible rezoning just 2 days before the commission meeting.
I was incredibly, I guess you might say, just flat out hurt when a couple days ago we get this letter telling us that for a crypto mine, I'm sorry, that's what it is. We've been there for 40 years. That was a gut punch.
The commission is also considering new standards for noise, setbacks, and landscape screening, and plans to discuss them again at their meeting on April 22nd. I'm James Kelly, IPR News.
The war in the Persian Gulf has driven fertilizer costs up dramatically at a terrible time for farmers. Farmers plant major crops like corn and soybeans in the spring, but first they put down lots of nitrogen fertilizer, chiefly urea. Urea is made with natural gas, and almost half of the world's exports of it typically ship through the Strait of Hormuz. Urea prices have gone up by about 30% since the strait closed. Josh Linville, vice president of fertilizer at StoneX, says it's his nightmare scenario.
It would be this exact event during this exact time of year. It doesn't get much worse than what we're dealing with today.
The Fertilizer Institute predicts American farmers will be short perhaps 2 million tons of urea this spring and grow less food because of it. You're listening to Hear First from IPR. I'm Megan McKinney. Tumbleweeds. We don't see a lot of those here in Iowa, but they have taken over parts of the Great Plains. So much so that sometimes they can shut down entire neighborhoods. We're going to take a look at this, as well as how this pervasive weed has made itself a part of the culture in the plains. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's Here First from IPR. I'm Megan McKinney. The High Plains have been taken over by tumbleweeds. It's not unusual to see the weed rolling along open spaces in Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and even Nebraska. But the plant thrives so well in western Kansas that sometimes they can shut down entire neighborhoods or highways. Harvest Public Media contributor Kaylin Moore reports on how this pervasive weed made itself a part of the culture in the plains.
You've seen it before in old Western movies with cowboys and gunslingers, and the music played during that time like the song Tumbling Tumbleweeds by Sons of the Pioneers.
Drifting along with a tumbling tumbleweed, I know.
In the movies, at the end when they stand off, a lonely tumbleweed hops along the dusty ground. Across the Great Plains region, it comes with the territory, and experiencing them in reality is not exactly how it's shown in the movies. In fact, people I talked to in Garden City, Kansas have seen way more.
It's not a normal day without the wind blowing, so constant tumbleweeds just pass us.
There were so many tumbleweeds that we couldn't even get to our house. It covered our entire house. We couldn't even get in our driveway.
And I was driving home, and every time you went to drive, you'd hit a freaking tumbleweed for like 30 minutes.
People in urban areas may be surprised by just how prominent this plant is on the frontier. Weed scientist Patrick Geyer for Kansas State University says the overlooked tumbleweed is often two species, kochia and Russian thistle. Western Kansas is the perfect place for them to thrive.
They love our droughty conditions. They thrive in the limited water environments. If we have an area where there's a blank patch of ground, these plants love it.
Geyer says that these plants have become so ubiquitous in this part of Kansas that they are just as much part of the area as wheat, cattle, and wind. But it wasn't always like that. In fact, tumbleweeds are a relatively new phenomenon on the frontier where they have claimed their new home. Tumbleweeds are native to Russia and Eastern Europe, and their journey to Kansas in the late 1800s might be the same reason the state claimed the title breadbasket.
So when the immigrants who came from that part of the world brought their wheat over, a lot of that wheat had these weed seeds in them. They didn't realize it. They were actually establishing some of these plants.
The weeds come up in early spring and dry out in late fall. A layer of cells around the stem die, so when a gust of wind sweeps through, the globe-shaped plant breaks off and is carried away. This is actually its strategy for creating more tumbleweeds. As it tumbles and tosses across flat western Kansas, upwards of 10,000 seeds shake out and sprout new tumbleweeds in their wake. This creates more of a nuisance than a novelty, especially for farmers like Vance Emke in the region.
One really good Russian thistle can remove like 44 gallons of water, and that will definitely have an impact on the yield of following crops like corn or milo the next year.
Part of why they're so common is that tumbleweeds were the first documented case of herbicide resistance in Kansas, making them harder for landowners to eradicate. With tumbleweeds flying all over and stacking up on each other, they can also cause real fire hazards. What do these small towns do when they battle these weeds?
And you pitch the tumbleweeds in there and get a good fire going in there and just burn them off as you go.
That's Liberal Fire Chief Kelly Kirk. He says, ironically, the solution is to burn them safely before they become an uncontrolled fire threat. Kirk says tumbleweeds are plentiful dry fuel and can burn quickly, posing a danger to fields and structures.
It literally inundated that entire neighborhood about 3 blocks deep into the city. And literally we cleaned up that entire area and burned off all of those tumbleweeds over a period of probably a week.
For those like Kirk, tumbleweeds aren't the lonely drifter that has come to represent the High Plains, but another nuisance and in some cases even a danger. For Harvest Public Media, I'm Kaylin Moore.
This story was originally produced by the Kansas News Service. It's being distributed by Harvest Public Media, which covers ag, food systems, and rural life, and IPR News is happy to be a part of that collaboration. Megan McKinney. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with tumbleweeds, but unfortunately for me, I grew up in Missouri, so I never got to see them. Guess I'll go to Kansas. I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for listening. We'll talk Monday.